What's going on, everybody? This is Graham and Micah with Brother Telepathy Football. We are back with our next video here. We're going to be talking about our final big board rankings for the 2025 NFL Draft. It's coming up really soon here, Micah. As of the recording of this video, we are 1 week away from the NFL Draft. It's going to be even sooner by the time this video comes out. But yeah, this is our final big board rankings. We did our initial version of the big board rankings a few weeks ago. Wanted to show you guys our kind of final rankings, how guys have moved up and down the board, where guys are listed, if there have been position rankings, changes, that sort of thing. So wanted to talk through all of that with you guys here today. But Micah, any thoughts or any context here before we get started?
Yeah, fired up for the draft. And I mentioned this in the last video, and it was very brief, but I'll go ahead and do it again. A lot of the guys that I have in this big board, and we'll talk about it once we get to the third slide because I have somebody there that over somebody else. I'll say that, but we'll get to that.
Nice little teaser. Okay.
Yeah, nice little teaser there. But either way, these are mostly guys. A lot of my consideration for my personal big board, I take multiple things into account, as most people do. I think the one wrinkle that I personally have on my big board is guys that I would be interested in if I was building my type of offense or defense. And I don't know if that makes sense to anybody else, but that's just a disclaimer that I have for my board in particular. I don't even know if that's something you do or if it's something that you consider. But if I was building my dream offense, I would want this guy playing receiver. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense to the viewers. So I don't know if that's anything you consider or your thoughts on that, but
makes sense to me. I do a little bit the same thing. I also take into account position value as well. Not like a ton. There are some guys that that's hugely important to them on their board, and I think if we were filling out like an actual draft board, that would be something we would do if we were in the GM seat. But for this exercise, it's really just kind of ranking guys one by one, just who's the best football player, that type of thing, which, can be subjective in some ways, but I think at the same time, that's kind of how we've gone about it so far.
I'm about to get the video started, so we'll click in here in just a second, but I think that's the beauty of the big board, and I probably talked about this last video we did about the big board. You can kind of argue for any person you want at any spot. Like, who's to say that I think the CB2 is more valuable than the DT5? Like, there's nobody you can make any argument work, and you can really have your own input and give your own philosophies as why you think each person deserves to be in what slot. So with that being said, we'll just go straight into it. A few things to note. Me and Graham were kind of talking over this before. We're kind of going to note some major changes we had in the big board as opposed to like the players, because obviously Walter Nolan for me is number 4, but we discussed that in the last big board, so I'm not going to touch on that. So if you see something that stands out, it's probably in the last video, so go check that out. But Josh Simmons moving up for me to the OT1. I bumped down Will Campbell, which we'll get to in the next slide, but bumped down Will Campbell. I think Josh Simmons' play style, and this is kind of going with what I was saying in the intro, he's got that like Trent Williams and Christian Darrisaw like type of play to him, and I think that's what, obviously when you think of the elite tackles in the NFL, those are 2 of the top 3 to 4 guys. So I think that his play style warrants being higher on the big board than most other tackles. So for that reason, he's my OT1. And then I have the Loveland Warren combo there at 10 and 11. Graham's got him at 10 and 11 as well, but we have him inverted, so maybe Graham will touch on that if he wants to. But either way, I personally like Loveland a little bit more than Warren. I watched a lot of J.J. McCarthy whenever he was coming out. I'm a Vikings fan, so by virtue, I've seen a lot of Colson Loveland. I've kind of found a soft spot in my heart for Colson Loveland. I love the game that he has. And then, I think that's kind of all I want to touch on. And then Luther Burden's my wide receiver 1 also. That's probably worth noting. But, Graham, I'll let you go ahead and touch on your 1 through 15.
Yeah, I'll highlight a couple guys here, a couple movements, and then I do want to get into the Warren Loveland discussion just a little bit. Not for too long here, but just wanted to briefly mention that. So, for me, I just keep moving up Cam Ward. I mean, it's no secret at this point. I am really fond of the player, so I've got him in my top 5. Been wanting to do it for a while now, and this is not just bias. Like, I really think this guy is a really, really good prospect. Would have been in the QB 3-4 conversation for me last year with all the other guys coming out. So, I don't think this is a stretch by any means. So there's that. Jalen Walker, Mike Green, Shamar Stewart. I like all those guys better than Mason Graham. Maybe a bit of a hot take. I have him a little bit lower than consensus at this point. So wanted to highlight that. Mason Graham is still a top 10 player for me, but number 8. I think the other D tackles are probably a little bit closer to Mason Graham than people are talking about. Derek Harmon, Walter Nolan for that matter. These guys are really good. So those first couple D tackle players are going to be strong NFL contributors. Next thing, Armand Membo for me, OT1 pretty easily. He is a right tackle, so again, maybe position value there, not as high as like a left tackle, like a Josh Simmons would play. And I think Membo probably could switch over if you wanted him to, but I think he's going to be most natural at a right tackle spot. And really, tackle is valuable. You need left tackle, you need right tackle. So I think that's worth noting. But and then the other main highlight is for me, Matthew Golden did overtake. If we're not counting Travis Hunter, which I would count Travis Hunter as a receiver, but if we're not counting Travis Hunter, Matthew Golden is wide receiver 1 for me over Tet McMillan, just slightly. I just like his combination of hands, route running, acceleration, deceleration, speed, obviously, too. So a guy that we've talked about a lot, like receivers. So I like Matthew Golden a lot. Still like Tet McMillan a lot, too, but I would have Matthew Golden over him at this point. And then, just briefly talking about Tyler Warren versus Colson Loveland. I was originally had Warren and Loveland 1-2 respectively, like I have now. I wanted to revisit it because I've heard a lot of love for Colson Loveland recently. He's still firmly a top 15 player for sure, but I still like Tyler Warren a lot. I mean, this is a guy who, I think did mostly play H-back, kind of that offset tight end spot for Penn State this year, so wasn't really as much in line as you would like for a tight end prospect to be. And he's not like a Brock Bowers. He's not that type of prospect. But this is a guy that I think really can exceed. He's a pretty big body guy, so he can box people out. He's got he's really good at the catch point. He's a bowling ball after he gets the ball in his hands. Obviously a versatile playmaker, and not to say we're guys who necessarily want their tight end being Taysom Hill, but at the same time, he's a really athletic player, smart football player. I mean, he was their leading receiver all year for Penn State, and Colson Loveland, his credit too, is in that same realm for Michigan. But I like Tyler Warren a lot. I think he's got more upside than people are talking about. People are talking about him as being like a really safe, high floor guy, which I think is true. But I think he's got a ways to go too in the blocking department as an inline guy. Obviously, if you want to stand him up on off the line of scrimmage as well, I think he could obviously excel there too. So that's kind of my elevator pitch for Tyler Warren. Still like Colson Loveland a lot, but I just like Tyler Warren overall more, I would say.
Yeah, totally valid. He's rocking the 44 in honor of John Riggins, so I love the mentality that he's got when he plays the position. But I'll go ahead and let you start on the 16 through 30 if there's anything you wanted to mention.
There wasn't as much I wanted to highlight here. Obviously, top 15 is pretty vital, so we wanted to spend a little bit of time there. But from 16 through 30, nothing crazy. Like I mentioned, I probably could have had the D tackles a little bit higher. I am fond of Derek Harmon out of Oregon in particular. Probably got him a little bit lower than he should be realistically, but I just like a lot of these other guys too. Omarion Hampton, I think, is a great player. Probably the biggest highlight for me on this one is Will Campbell did slide down a good bit from our last rankings, and I do have him as an interior offensive lineman. I think we briefly mentioned that in one of our recent videos as well, but I do project him more as a guard than a tackle, and going into the cycle, I thought he was certainly going to be a tackle for me, but I think just with the athletic profile, just not the strongest anchor. I think he's going to slot better as a guard personally at the next level. But I can see the argument either way. So, I'm not mad if somebody says he's a tackle for them. But I think that is the main couple things I wanted to highlight for me personally on this one.
Will Campbell, real quick, just because we're already talking about him. I have him as a tackle. We've definitely mentioned that before on the channel. And I did drop him as well. He was pretty high on my rankings. Now he's like my offensive lineman number 4, I believe, behind Booker, Membo, and Simmons. So a little bit of a slide for him. What I did want to note is the Georgia Cats. They're at 18 and 19. I do quite like Micah Williams. I'm fond of his game. I know the Texas game in particular stands out in my mind, where he kind of bullied Cameron Williams and Kelvin Banks there on either side of the offensive line. I think that he's got a ton of upside. Pass rushing is yet to come with him, so we'll see how that translates. And then at the bottom, another pair of teammates, also edge rushers, ironically, Shamar Stewart and Nick Scorton. I'm lower on Shamar Stewart than the consensus. I'd like to see, obviously the athletic profile is one of one, literally. I mean, we have literally never seen an edge perform the way he did in the combine. I just want to see a little bit more. Like, a little bit more production would have probably put him in the top 20 for me, but I just can't, in good faith, have him higher than where he's at based on the limited production. Because if we just look at production for face value, he's the worst out of all 50 players on my big board, given his position. Maybe that's a stretch, but you get what I'm trying to say. I'm not super impressed with that. And then Nick Gordon, I have him right below there at 30. It's kind of just pick your flavor there. I like Shamar Stewart a little bit better than Nick Gordon, so he edges him out. Pause. And then we have on this one I wanted to quickly mention the Iowa State. Shout out to the Cyclones because they occupy 3 of my players on my 31 through 45 spot with Malik Vernon. I got lost. Porter and Higgins. Yeah, Porter and Higgins. So 2 DBs featured, both super long, super athletic. I'm just kind of more interested to see how their career plays out and where they end up. I think that if they end up in the right spot, as we've mentioned multiple times before, they could be a force wherever they're at. And then I also wanted to mention there at 45, I have for months been leading the charge in the draft community. I'll say that. I'll say it with my chest. I've been leading the charge for the Shedeur Sanders hate, and it continues out of straight peer pressure. Had Shedeur as a top 50 player on my board. And I'm not afraid to admit it, I was peer pressured into putting Shedeur Sanders in my top 50. That dies today. That dies probably like 3 days ago when I did my big board update. But either way.
Officially today.
Nail in the coffin. Jalen Milroe is someone that I have sung his praises before the draft cycle and draft conversations even started. Simply because, and I saw someone else say this on Twitter, and it's funny how stuff that me and you say keeps coming around months later that people finally catch on to. Jalen Milroe is, I remember watching these games, and I would say Jalen Milroe is the best running quarterback I've ever seen in my own eyes. I have never seen, in the time that I've been researching prospects and getting into the draft in the NFL, Jalen Milroe is the best running quarterback I've ever seen. And I think that with his work ethic and how he was revered as a starting quarterback, obviously the Georgia game was like the game where everybody was like, holy moly, what can we might have something. The rest of the year kind of fell off. But I think that his willingness to learn, fix the footwork, fix the motion, obviously he's got the legs to where that can help him in the NFL. It raises his ceiling more than anybody else at the position. I have him in my top 50.
Yeah. I'm really fond of Milroe as well. I think you hear guys talk about like the character with him, and that's really encouraging. And then you're right. I mean, if you're not going to be the most polished passer, you better be a freak athletically, and he is maybe the epitome of freak athlete at the quarterback position. I mean, I'm sure he'd be a top 50 running back in this class if he was a running back, and I don't mean that disrespectfully to Jalen Milroe. I think he throws a great deep ball too, so I think he's got room to improve as a passer. But just the frame that he has, the athletic makeup, like I think again, I don't mean it as like the Lamar Jackson always should play running back. I don't mean it like that. I mean that his running ability is akin to that of a running back. Like, and that again is a
such power. Like I've never seen a running back run with less finesse in the best sense of the word possible. Like a straight power runner. Like. I don't. He's the Terminator. I don't think Jalen Milroe will, knock on wood, ever get hurt just because like it doesn't feel like it's in his DNA to get hurt. Like it feels like he's gonna like run through somebody's face and then get up and just go back to the huddle and then do it again. Like, yeah, I'm a huge fan. So the tools are too much for me to say anything lower than 45. Certainly That's higher fair. Than Shedeur Sanders. So I'll let you take it away with the slide.
That's fair. I did keep Shedeur at QB2. I did bump Tyler Shuck up to QB3 for me at this point. I don't think either of these guys are first-round quarterbacks. I wouldn't even really be that comfortable taking either of them in the early stage of round 2. I think if you need a quarterback, yep. I mean, I think they're decent options, but I'm not really comfortable taking them too terribly high in the second round again, unless you need one, which a lot of these teams do, especially at the top of these rounds here. So yeah, for me, I'll remain steady on kind of my take on Shedeur and Tyler Shuck and all these guys, but I can understand where you're coming from as well. For me, probably biggest change here, I folded a little bit, and I did take Luther Burden over Jalen Royals. I think just for the sheer reason that I think Luther Burns a little bit more proven to be like a Z type of receiver at the next level. Jalen Royals at this point probably is limited to mostly a slot type of guy just based on what he's done so far. However, though, I think he actually probably has more potential than even Luther Burden does at the next level. I think this is a guy that has not really played that much at receiver. I don't have to go on about Jalen Royals too much here. I've talked about him enough during this cycle, but a guy that I think has a lot of upside. But at the same time, though, I think maybe the floor is a little bit higher for Luther Burden, so that's why I ultimately switched them. But not a huge change there. I'll just shout out another Iowa State guy that I included in here, Jalen Knoll, as well. Another receiver. A lot of guys talk about Jaden Higgins. Jalen Knoll was a guy that maybe had the best Senior Bowl of any of the receivers out there. A guy that's certainly gotten a lot of love early in the process. Now, like Kyle Williams out of Wazoo has kind of overtaken him a little bit as like the early day two type of receiver build from that slot position. But I like Jalen Knoll a lot, and I think he's going to do a lot of damage at the next level, particularly in the slot. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to mention on 31 through 45. And then just rolling right here into 46 through 50. Biggest name for me on this page is going to be Jackson Dart. I did bump him down to QB4. A guy that I think will put the ball where it needs to be if it's in front of him, and I do like that about his game. I just don't know how he's going to handle an NFL type of offense. I think the top 10 buzz for him is ridiculous. Same with Shador. I'm not taking either of those guys anywhere near the top 10 if I'm drafting a quarterback or needing to draft a quarterback. But Jackson Dart's got some tools you like. And then probably for me, the biggest thing that it's kind of a double-edged sword because one of my biggest knocks on Jackson Dart was I feel like he chose to tuck and run too often. I don't know if he was coached to do that or what. But at the same time, I liked how he moved in the pocket, meaning he would move north, meaning he'd step up in the pocket. Whereas somebody like Shador, obviously one of the biggest knocks on him that you and I have had, drifts, moves backwards, he moves laterally, it often moves back before he moves side to side. So, I like the way Jackson Dart moves in the pocket. However, I think he chooses to tuck and run too often. So that's probably my biggest concern with him. Plus, I don't think the arm talent's like out of this world. I think it's better than Shador's, but I don't think it's anywhere close to like Cam Ward. And then I did include Josiah Stewart in here, just crack my top 50. An undersized guy, we talked about it before, one of these 3-4 outside linebacker type of builds in this edge rusher class, but a guy who plays a lot bigger than his size. I mean, he is an anomaly in a bad way from the edge rusher like measurable standpoint, but and really is not like that athletic either, but just a guy who gets things done, and I just like that about his game. So I did include him in the top 50 here.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff there as well. For mine, the only name that I kind of want to highlight here is Gray Zabel. I think, and positional value, I've tried my best not to consider whenever I do my big board. I try to take for face value who are the best 50 players and put them on the board. Gray Zabel, the biggest problem I had with him is the most impressive he looked, which maybe this is a highlight for some people, but to me it was more of a knock for him. The most impressive he looked was at the Senior Bowl with, shells on, which for those of you who never played football, this is like just shoulder pads and helmet. You're in just shells. It's not a true one-of-one football environment. I think it's enough to scare me a little bit. I think that what does he play? That's another consideration. I have him listed as interior. Does that mean center or guard? Possibly tackle if he has to. Too many question marks from me. I think he's going to be a great player, and I think he's fine for right now. I just get a weird feeling in my stomach enough to make me put him in the top 50, but not towards the top half of the top 50. So that's kind of my reasoning for that. But yeah, that's kind of all I wanted to highlight as well. I talked about Ozzie Trapillo in the video that we just filmed, so I don't know if that comes out before this or after this, but we'll see his name come up again. So that's all I got for this one.
Yeah, I think me too. Just wanted to highlight, of course, our updated rankings here. This is going to be our final big board rankings. Not much to change at this point. Didn't really talk about it in this video, but we don't often take into account like character concerns too much, just unless it's like very clearly out there for public knowledge, but something that we don't have access to. So we're talking mostly about just tape study, how these guys look on film, all that good stuff. So I think that's pretty much all I had. You want to close it out here, Micah?
Yeah, sounds good. We're going to give most of these guys the benefit of the doubt when it comes to that sort of stuff, like Graham said. So definitely not a consideration for most of the list, but obviously those should be taken seriously as well. But that's all the video we have for today. Obviously, draft coming up in a week, so Graham and I will have more content leading up to that, and then after that, we're going to be bombarding with content. We've got a couple ideas of things we want to do, and obviously we want to talk about teams and grading players for what teams they go to. It'll be super fun to talk about. This is my favorite time of the year, so I'm super excited to see what happens in the next week here. Aaron Rodgers has also got some news coming out, so he had the whole jet spiel go on today. So I don't know if you watched any of that, but
Yeah, I did.
it's interesting to see. So I'm sure that he'll make some big announcement on draft night. We might talk about that. Who knows?
Who knows?
But yeah, that's all we got for today. So we appreciate you guys tuning in. Again, this is our top 50 big board, our final big board. So yeah, we'll see you guys in the next one. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Yep, see ya.